much, Professor Pinizio. It's always a pleasure being back to your beautiful city, Turin, and to be back with you. And now it's actually opening. I can only disappoint you. That's actually quite clear. But thank you also for your kind words. I always tend to say that since my mother is not in the room, there's no need for such a nice introduction. Above all, I should actually thank you that you survived all your lectures, and now I'm the only one that you have to suffer until you're released from your program, but I'll try to be at least as good as my former colleagues. So thank you very much for joining us. I admit that I'm not used to this style of lectures, but you stand here. Usually I walk around students and tend to walk a lot. I count my steps on a daily basis. So I'll try to walk here. This will be my little show here, show area. You know, one actually should ask herself or himself, why actually study Israeli-European Union relations? And you'll be surprised that the major reason is because if you really want to understand European foreign policy, you really need to understand Israeli-EU relations. And you should ask yourself why, and the answer is very simple. Because the first case study that was there on the table from day one of the European political cooperation, what is known to be today as the CFSP, was the Israeli-Arab conflict. Israel was actually the third country in the world to ask the European Union, at that time the European Economic Community, to open an embassy to the communities in 1957. And eventually Israel was actually the fourth country in the world to recognize the EU. If you have an idea who were the first two countries, someone would like to try and tell us who were the first two countries to recognize the communities?
To recognize Israel?
No, to recognize the European communities. Well, someone from the Mediterranean followed the sun to Greece. So it was Greece and the US, and the third one was actually Israel. Strangely enough, by the way, at that time, Israel, 2 months immediately after the Treaty of Rome was signed, even before it entered into force, it was actually already translated into Hebrew. That was the level of interest in Israel of the European Union. And this tells you a story. It tells you a story because in many respects, Israel is from Europe, but not really in Europe. Proportionally speaking, guys, 55% of Israelis are what we call would-be EU citizens. This makes Israel, proportionally speaking, the largest concentration on earth of would-be EU citizens. 12% are already holding EU citizenships. I don't know if many of you are aware of the fact that several years ago, both Spain and Portugal enacted new laws of return for Jews who are descendants of Jews that were deported from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492 and 1496, and Jews today can actually apply for Portuguese citizenship, and until very recently also for Spanish citizenship, provided they can prove that they are direct descendants of Jews that were deported in 1492. For example, my own surname is a typical Spanish surname, and my family was deported. My ancestors were deported from the Iberian Peninsula, and 2 years ago I got my Portuguese citizenship. So it tells you a story. 55% of Israelis are basically part of you guys. Now what we do in our research, we're looking at you while you're looking at us. Exactly the same situation in which we are in right now. I'm looking at you, I'm studying you, while you're listening to me and studying me. And this is what we are doing as researchers in our European Center. We try to understand Israelis' perceptions towards the European Union, and we try to understand your perceptions towards Israel. Now, when Israel's first prime minister sent his ambassador, Don Raphael, to Brussels, He asked him for a meeting. Now, that ambassador was sure that this is just, a lip service, just a meet and greet meeting, and probably the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, David Ben-Gurion, wouldn't be even interested in the new mission that Israel is about to open in Brussels. However, Gidon Raphael tells us that actually he heard a completely different story. He heard from the Prime Minister that Israel is extremely interested in the new European communities that were formed in Brussels. More than that, for more than an hour, the Prime Minister didn't even mention once the Holocaust or the history. He just spoke about the future of these communities and the state of Israel, which actually was quite a surprise, bearing in mind that we are talking about 1957. Now, Ben-Gurion himself, the first Prime Minister of the country, was actually very much into Europe. In one of his most fascinating letter regarding Europe that he sent to George Antonius, who is a Lebanese Egyptian diplomat and historian, he wrote to him the following, and listen to it carefully. Although we are an Eastern people, we have become a European people. And we wish to return to the land of Israel only in the geographical sense. Our aim is to create a European culture here, and we are at any rate linked to the major cultural force in the world, as long as the cultural basis in this part of the world does not change. This tells you the story of what the founder of the State of Israel had in mind regarding the European integration process. And in many respects, and indeed today, Europe and the European Union is Israel's economic, cultural, and in many respects, I would say, political hinterland. Let me just start by showing you, first of all, the following slide. These are the trade figures for 2018. Many of you would tend to think that Israel is absolutely dependent on the US. It might be so when it comes to security. However, when it comes to trade with foreign countries, look what's going on here. EU, 41% of the Israeli import is coming from the European Union. 28% of its export goes to European markets. US import, 13%. I remind you, 41% European Union, 13% the US. This is another slide which tells you another story. Israel is basically absolutely dependent on European markets. This is your leverage over Israel. We can argue whether you are able to do something with this leverage, but this is your leverage over Israel. Israel, financially, economically speaking, is absolutely dependent on European Union markets. So this tells you another story. This is 2018. Now back in 1957, if I'm going back in my in history, you will be surprised to reveal that in 1957 Israel was so interested in the European Economic Community to the extent that Israel almost became the 7th member state of the newly erected European communities. Israel was so interested in joining the European communities that in 1957, on a secret mission, the person who was at the latest stage, the guy on my left and on your right, Shimon Peres, who was a special advisor to the Prime Minister and the Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Defense, was sent by the Prime Minister on a secret mission to negotiate with Jean Monnet the idea of full Israeli membership in the European communities. At that time, Jean Monnet told Shimon Peres, well, you go and work on your relations with Germany, and I will try to see what's going on within the European Union. Eventually, Israel was simply too poor to join the European communities. This was ruled out. This was never really officially negotiated. It was only negotiated behind closed doors. But you can imagine what kind of history we would have been in today, whether Israel would have been actually a new or the seventh member state of the European communities. So in 1957, that was the case. Paris met in the dark with Jean Monnet, was so interested in joining the European community. This never really materialized, and in 1958 Israel already became, or asked to become, an associate member in the European communities. Later on, as I said, in 1958, eventually Israel is officially recognizing the European communities. The fourth country, the third one that was interested in opening a mission, and the fourth one that eventually did so. And later on, trade agreements with European communities were signed. The first one was actually signed in 1964, then the second one was signed in 1970, and in 75, a third one was signed. This was literally a free trade area with some limited access to European markets. But the Israeli-European relations never fully materialized due to one major issue, and that has to do, of course, with the Israeli-Arab and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And you've heard a lot from Dr. Lili Habash about the issues. I'm not going to elaborate about the Israeli-Palestinian and Arab conflicts. However, you can imagine that this really basically was up there in the air and is still out there. And this is probably one of the major obstacles for developing Israeli-EU relations. The most important European statement on the Middle East peace process is what we call the Venice Declaration, which was obviously declared in Venice by the foreign ministers. This is probably the most important and still remains a valid statement of European foreign policy on the Middle East peace process. Now, I don't want to go through the full declaration, but I would like to go through the following points, because in that Venice Declaration, the European Union basically touched upon any raw nerve of the conflict and on any possible raw nerve of Israel and the Israeli government. Let's start with clause number 6. A just solution must finally be found to the Palestinian problem, listen to the following, which is not simply one of refugees. This goes against the UN resolutions. So for the first time, we see not just normative power Europe, but we see Europe arguing against basically the official line of the UN. The Palestinian people, which is conscious of existing as such, must be placed in a position by an appropriate process defined within the framework of the comprehensive peace settlement to exercise fully its right to self-determination. I remind you, in 1980, PLO is considered by most of the world to be a terrorist organization. At that time, Europe is saying, this is not a terrorist organization, this is not a refugee problem, this is a people which deserves its right to self-determination. A very, very strong statement which goes against the US line, which goes against the international community line. This is a very bold statement of the European foreign ministers. Next, clause number 7. The achievement of these objectives requires the involvement and support of all the parties concerned in the peace settlement, which the at that time, nine member states, are endeavoring to promote in keeping with the principles formulated in the declaration referred above. Listen to the following. This is all but a bomb which is falling on the Middle East peace process. These principles are binding on all the parties concerned and are thus the Palestinian people and on the PLO, which will have to be associated with the negotiations. As I said, the PLO, which is recognized by most of the countries at that time as terrorist organizations, basically the foreign ministers are saying, you will have to negotiate with the PLO. A very, very bold statement. Israel actually recognizes the PLO only in 1994. So 14 years before Israel actually recognized the reality, and the rest of the world actually recognized the reality in the Oslo, 14 years before, it was actually the European Union which had this very bold statement, foreign policy statement on the Middle East. So first, the Palestinian question is not just a refugee question. Second, PLO is a valid actor in the process. Next, the nine recognizes the special importance of the role played by the question of Jerusalem. So, we touch upon the question of refugees, which is not a question of refugees. We touch upon the PLO, which is no longer just a terrorist organization. Now we go to another owner, the question of Jerusalem, for all parties concerned. The nine stress that they will not accept any unilateral initiative designed to change the status of Jerusalem, and that any agreement on the city's status should guarantee freedom of access for everyone to the holy places. Again, a very strong statement on another raw nerve in the conflict. Listen to the following. If we didn't have enough, we go on. The nine stress the need for Israel to put an end to the territorial occupation, which it has maintained since the conflict of 1967, as it has done for part of Sinai, the Sinai Desert. They are deeply convinced that the Israeli settlements constitutes a serious obstacle to the peace process in the Middle East. The nine consider that these settlements, as well as modifications in populations and property in the occupied Arab territories, are illegal under international law. So this is probably the highest level of normative power Europe, or normative power Europe at its best. Basically, the European foreign ministers in 1980, before the rest of the world, tackled with all the hardcore issues of the Israeli-Palestinian question. Not the refugee, PLO, Jerusalem, and settlements. I can only disappoint you that from here onwards, the European position is unfortunately not as strong as it was in 1980, and it is to some extent going backward rather than forward. By the way, if you have questions, feel free to raise questions during my talk, and later on anyway, I will leave some time for questions and answers. So this was a very, very strong statement and a very bold statement of the European foreign ministers. And as I said, the Israeli-Palestinian Arab conflicts are basically the number one case studies of European foreign policy. Since day one, this issue is on the table and is being discussed on a monthly basis by the European foreign ministers since 1971. Now, you can imagine that the Israeli government was extremely unhappy, to say the least, with this statement. And in 1980, the Prime Minister of the time in Israel, who is the leader of the Likud party, which still runs the government, Menachem Begin, and listen probably to the harshest and the strongest condemnation ever of an Israeli government of a foreign policy statement. Since Mein Kampf was written, the entire world, including Europe, has not heard anything more explicit about the aspiration to destroy the Jewish state and nation. Several European states are prepared to underwrite and even to guarantee militarily the concept of peace shared by that organization of murderers. Obviously it refers to the PLO. This will disgust anyone who remembers anything and who is aware of the results of the guarantee given to Czechoslovakia in 1938, after Sudetenland was ripped from her, also in the name of self-defense. Israel does not ask for any guarantee over security for any of the people of Europe. Israel is capable of defending herself. Any person of goodwill or free man who pursues this document will see it as a Munich-like surrender, the second in our generation, to dictatorial blackmail, and as encouragement for all those who are subverting the Camp David Accords, the peace process with Egypt, and who aspire to ensure the failure of the Middle East Islam. With that statement, Menachem Begin in the parliament takes the Venice Declaration, tears it apart, and that is basically the end of Israeli-European relations for quite a while. Probably until the mid-90s, Israel literally refused to talk to Europe. For more than 15 years, Israel simply ignored and basically boycotted Europe due to the Venice Declaration. Until today, the Venice Declaration is in most of Israeli leaders' attitudes, or shaped the attitudes of most of Israeli leaders vis-à-vis the European Union. So Venice Declaration is probably the strongest condemnation of Israel ever from the European side, and it is the lowest point ever of Israeli-EU relations. From here, things in a way can only get better, but it took them quite a while to get better and better. And I think the statement, the Israeli government statement, tells you the real story of what Israel at that time thought of the European Union. Israel from that moment onward literally excluded the European Union from any major role in the proceedings of any peace initiative. Israel literally refused to talk to Europe and to European representatives for at least 15 years. And in 1991, when the US was actually thinking of a new Middle East peace process, which today we call the Middle East peace process, and one should remember the real Middle East peace process, as we call it today, was actually launched in 1991 in Madrid. The US actually contemplated the idea of approaching the Europeans and asked them to join forces with the Americans and launch this new process. However, Israel said, no way, the Europeans are out. And the US was forced to approach Russia and, the former USSR, because Israel refused any European role in the peace process. So in 1991, officially, the Middle East peace process started with the key hosts, which were the US on the one side and Russia on the other hand, but not the European Union, not yet the European Union, because the European Union comes into effect only 2 years later. So, and the thing is that the European Union or the European communities at the time possessed very little leverage over Israel, and its voice was simply ignored by Jerusalem. Jerusalem simply couldn't care less of what Europe has to say. To some extent, I must say that until today, Israel couldn't care less about the European Union or what the European Union has to say. I already put this on the table, and I will argue later on that under Netanyahu, Israel is becoming a soft Eurosceptic country and actually joined the Eurosceptic illiberal camp in Europe. And today, Israel basically joined forces with countries like Hungary, like the Czech Republic, like Slovakia, basically the V4 countries, and does its utmost to object any European move. But we will discuss it later on. Now, in 1993, Israel actually signed the famous Oslo Agreement, which I'm sure Lily elaborated on it from a Palestinian perspective. But at that time, the spirit was high. And since the spirit was so high, the Europeans were called into the picture. And Europe was asked to join in, but with a very limited role. Europe at that time was asked to be in charge of the regional group, which was basically working on infrastructural projects for the better of the region. Eventually, as we know, that process did not materialize. However, the regional group, or the only working group which really worked, was the European Union group. So definitely, the Oslo Peace Agreement led to what I would call a qualitative change in Israeli-EU relations, and negotiations for a new trade agreement were launched between Israel and the European Union. I remind you that the last agreement was signed in 1975. One has to say the truth, this was, by the way, the worst ever trade agreement that was signed with any third country. However, the European Union still signed an agreement, even though the Arab countries warned the Europeans that they will boycott the community. Still, the European Union insisted on signing a trade agreement in Israel. However, it was of a very limited nature and not a very generous nature. For that, the Israeli government said, well, if the Europeans are interested in joining somehow the process, they will have to give us a better agreement. And they actually put pressure on the European Union to offer Israel a better agreement. In a minute we'll touch that agreement. However, in 1994, the Israelis managed to force the European Union to give Israel what they call a spatial status. An Essen summit of head of states and governments, Essen, Germany, the head of states declared the following: Israel, on account of its high level of economic development, listen to the following, should enjoy a special status in its relations with the European Union on the basis of reciprocity and common interests. So basically, from no talking into a special status within a period of 14 years. And indeed, the next step was the 1995 Euro-Mediterranean Association Agreement, which was signed as part of the famous Barcelona process, and I guess there's no need to elaborate on the Barcelona process. But let me just give you some of the principles of the the new free trade area, which was signed by the European Union and Israel for the first time. As you know, this is not just an economic agreement. This is far more than an economic agreement. This is a political agreement. And you can see the principles, the importance of the existing traditional links between the parties and the common values they share. The parties wish to strengthen those links and to establish lasting relations based on reciprocity and partnership and promote further integration of Israel's economy into the European economy. By the way, one should say that at that time, and definitely today, Israeli economy is far better than many of the European member states themselves. So at that time already, in 1995, the Israeli economy reached the level, was very, very strong, probably at that time similar to the average European market. Today, one truth should be said, that financially speaking, the Israeli economy is actually doing quite well. And that's why Israel was interested in further integration into the European economy. The importance which the parties attach to the principles of economic freedom and the principles of the UN Charter, particularly the observation of human rights and democracy. Clearly, this is a message to Israel regarding the Palestinians and the Israeli Arabs, which was put into the association agreement. Later on, or we will move on rather, the parties need to associate their efforts to strengthen political stability and economic development through the encouragement of regional cooperation, i.e., you will have to work with your neighbors, you will not have just bilateral relations between Israel and the European Union, however, you will have to work on your relations with us under the roof of the famous Barcelona process. Then the party's desire of establishing and developing regular political dialogue, not a typical association agreement, a free trade agreement, in which you discuss a political dialogue on bilateral and international issues. The party's desire of maintaining and intensifying a dialogue on economic, scientific, technological, cultural, audiovisual, and social matters. And listen to the following. In 1994, due to Israeli science and development research, Israel was the first country in the world to join what we know today, Horizon 2020, at the time, the European Research and Development Program. And by the way, since Israeli research and science is so strong, Israel today is the third most successful member state in these programs. And I must admit that my own university is very, very active on that front. So basically today, Israel is a full member state when it comes to research and development. Israeli researchers are actually part of the European scientific area. And this is not a free process, as you can imagine. Israel, by the way, gives 1 billion euros per program. This is for the current program. However, it gets around 1.5 back with good research that it wins. So Israel on that front is a full member state in the European Research and Development Program. This is here. This is 1994, 1995, from that moment onwards. Now, you can imagine, and now I don't want to dive into the association agreement, however, I would like to show you the following clause, which was developed at that time on the Israeli, Israel was the greenhouse for the development of the free trade area agreements that the European Union developed. And listen to the following. This is clearly not a typical free trade area. Relations between the parties, as well as all the provisions of the agreement itself, shall be based on respect for human rights and democratic principles which guides their internal and international policy, constitutes an essential element of the agreement. What, guys, you see here in this slide is normative power Europe. This is normative power Europe at its best. Our relations are based on human rights. Our relations are based on democratic principles. And it is an essential, this clause constitutes an essential element of the agreement. This is normative power Europe at its best. Whether Europe actually implemented this clause is a completely different story. However, the fact that the European Union decided to include such a clause in an agreement, in a free trade agreement, tells you a story about your own identity. Now, I'm not going to discuss the Barcelona process. You all know the Barcelona basket, so I'm not going to discuss it. However, as you probably know, Barcelona, in a way, is a dead initiative. And nowadays, we have the Union for the Mediterranean. Did you discuss the Union for the Mediterranean in classes?
Yeah, maybe they did today, just today.
Okay, so you've heard of the Union for the Mediterranean, which was the initiative of the time of Mr. Sarkozy, President Sarkozy, which was basically the next generation of the Barcelona process. And along with the 28 member states, 15,000 Mediterranean states, including Israel and the Palestinian Authority, joined this initiative. Israel, for the first time, had a Secretary General. Together, by the way, the Palestinians also had their own Secretary General in the Union for the Mediterranean. And the Union for the Mediterranean, which I must admit, I don't think that it's a big success. However, it is a regional project. However, once again, Europe is successful in promoting regional cooperation in the region, which one might argue, again, is a normative statement on behalf of the European Union. You can see some of the initiatives of the Union for the Mediterranean. By the way, it has a beautiful house in Barcelona. You can see it there on your right. The depollution of the Mediterranean Sea, the establishment of maritime lane highways, a joint civil protection program, the Mediterranean Solar Energy Plan, and your Mediterranean University in Slovenia. By the way, an active university, the Mediterranean Business Development Initiative. So the idea was actually to work within projects, regional projects, between all the partners. Israel, our countries, and the Europeans are all working together. Now, one must say that the Association Agreement of 1995 has created a framework of regular political dialogue between the parties. This was the first time that basically on an annual basis, the Israeli foreign minister, together with all the foreign ministers of the European Union, sat together, discussed issues. However, since 2012, this forum didn't meet due to the tension in Israeli-European Union relations. This forum has 10 subcommittees and one working group on human rights. Now, this is the state of the art. Unfortunately, we are in 2019 and we're still working on a model which was developed in the 90s. However, this is the envelope of the relationship, the current relationship. And I must say that it is very interesting. However, it lacks any grand strategy on both sides. No one knows where these relations can really go to. It's an interesting document. For 1995, it was probably the most interesting one because based on the Israeli model, the European Union started signing and negotiating agreements basically with the rest of the world, definitely with the Mediterranean, but also based on this model, these are all the FTAs that were signed with the rest of the world. So the main one, the first one, was the Israeli Association Agreement in 1995. Now, from here, what I would like to do, this is the Essen Declaration. We can discuss maybe the European neighborhood policy. Maybe I'll just say something about the European. You know what? I'll do the European neighborhood policy in a second. However, what I'd like to do, because this is actually high time for it, I would like to go now to one of the major issues in EU-Israeli relations, and this has to do with Israeli settlements products. You hear about it all the time. And this is a major stumbling block in the relations. However, one should really put it in a context. Israeli settlement products constitute 0.1% of the total trade between Israel and the European Union. So we hear about it all the time, but we should put it in perspective. It's 0.1%. Now I'm saying it because what I'll try to argue here is that this is more a normative issue than a real financial matter. This is clearly a normative stance that the European Union takes, and on the ground, one should also add that there's zero influence on the ground itself. However, it is a strong statement of the European Union. So the story starts in 1995 when Israel and the European Union signed their free trade agreement, the 1995 free trade agreement. And the agreement was signed on the one side with Israel, covers the territory of the State of Israel, and on the other hand, it was signed with the European Union and all its member states, and at that time they actually excluded several territories from the agreement, such as Ceuta and Melilla, and some of the French areas in the Pacific. However, when it comes to Israel, they said that it covers the territory of the State of Israel. You can imagine that this is a beautiful recipe for a major issue which will come very soon. Now, in 1993, even before this agreement was signed, there was already a temporary agreement between the European Union and Israel. There were some creative, I should say, importers in Israel. Creative was an understatement to corrupt, who thought, we have a great idea. We can buy very cheap orange juice in Brazil, send it to Israel, pack it in Israel, label it as made in Israel, and send it to European markets. Why should we do that? We pay out, €1 in Brazil, and we sell it for 20 euros in wherever. Now, this is what we call a fraud. And the European custom authorities realized that something fishy is going with these boxes full of oranges which are not really coming from Israel. So the European Union decided to investigate, the European Commission decided to investigate this oranges issue and realized that the oranges is actually coming from Brazil, which does not have a free trade area agreement with the European Union. So it means that exporters from Brazil would pay far more in bringing their products into the market, and this is what you call a fraud. However, during the investigation, the European authorities realized that we have another issue. Brussels, we have a problem. What is the territory of the State of Israel? What is the area which is covered by the association agreement which we just signed with Israel? On the European side, we know that it doesn't cover Ceuta, Melilla, and other territories. However, when it comes to Israel, we have no idea. We know that it covers the territory of the State of Israel. Israel, on its part, refused to identify its territory. And this goes on and on and on. In 1995, the custom authorities of some European member states sent letters to Israel. Can you please identify a territory? At the beginning, Israel said, these are territories that are administered by Israel. However, at the later stage, Israel simply refused to answer the questions. Letters were sent, answers were never given. Clearly you know why, because we're talking about products which are coming from the occupied territories, from settlements in the occupied territories. In 2003, the European Union said, you know what, since we have no idea what constitutes the territory of the State of Israel, we'll simply tax all your products. Everything. anything which is coming from Tel Aviv, Haifa, or Beersheba will be taxed like as if it is coming from a foreign country. At that time, Israel said, no, we have to discuss it. So at that time, the Israeli Minister of Trade, who was later on the Prime Minister, with Olmert, came to Europe and said, you know what, we can agree on a technical agreement, which means that we will label the territories or the product as made in Israel, and for your comfort, we will also add the postcode. Now, you can prepare a list of postcodes, and whatever you decide, which is not part of Israel, according to the postcode, it doesn't enter tax-free into European market. An interesting technical agreement. Now, needless to say that the Europeans said that this is only a technical issue, but you know exactly what's going on here. The European Union literally imposes the 67 borders on Israel. Israel was willing to play the game, okay, we'll give them postcodes. You can imagine, by the way, that within 2 years Israel completely changed the postcode system, so no one understands anything. Needless to say that the lists that were prepared by the European Union were no longer valid. At that time Israel argued, we don't have enough numbers. So they changed completely the whole system of postcodes. And beautiful, we can all play the game as if nothing is going on. However, in 2010, Brita, this famous water purifying company, sold in Germany these CO2 carbonated machines, SodaStream. We all know probably what SodaStream is, this machine that you press 3 times, you get the and you have beautiful soda water. However, SodaStream in Israel had a manufacturer, a factory in the occupied territory. So the German custom authorities raised the question where these products, which Brita, the importer into Germany, sold into in Europe and in the German markets. Needless to say, the Israelis never answered because they stopped answering these questions in 1996, basically. And the German authorities decided, well, you know what, let's be creative. If it doesn't fall under the agreement which was signed with Israel in 1995, a similar agreement was signed with the Palestinians. Since the factory is in the Palestinian occupied territory, why couldn't it be under the Palestinian agreement? Very creative idea, but this was sent, of course, for an advisory opinion to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. In 2010, you wouldn't be surprised to know that the judges in Luxembourg have spoken. And this is what they had to say. Each of the 2 association agreements, the one with Palestine, the one with Israel, has its own territorial scope. The EC-Israel agreement applies to the territory of the State of Israel, whereas the ECPLO agreement applies to the territory of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, i.e., you cannot argue that an Israeli product which is coming from the occupied territory will fall under the PLO agreement, which means that it will enter European markets under that agreement. Therefore, products originating in the West Bank do not fall within the territorial scope of the EC-Israel agreement and do not therefore qualify for preferential treatment under that agreement. Clearly, another clear normative statement. Products from the occupied territories, from Israeli factories in the occupied territories, are not to be recognized as made in Israel. Very clear message, once again, a very strong normative condemnation for occupation. If you think for a second that that was enough, you're wrong. Because only last week we had another decision. Let's go there. But before we talk about that decision, We should mention that in 2013, again, we had to discuss where is Israel, because we don't know where Israel is. In 2013, Israel wanted to join again the new research and development program that was Horizon 2020. The Europeans said, we want Israel in the program because we value Israeli research and development. However, Israel, meanwhile, established a new university, which was basically a community college in the occupied territories. And we don't want that college, which today is a university, to be part of the program. Therefore, the European Union said Horizon 2020, Israel in Horizon 2020, yes. Occupied territories, no. You can imagine a tug of war. Eventually, Israel agreed to this normative stance. However, in 2015, we are back to the issue of products from the occupied territories. You already know the Brita decision, and you would expect that the European Union would demand from Israel to identify products from the settlements. Needless to say, Israel did its utmost not to identify products from the occupied territories. Therefore, the European Union in 2015, Madame Mogherini, published an interpretive notice on indication of origin of goods, which basically said that goods from the occupied territories must be labeled as settlements products. Otherwise, this is not ethical. Otherwise, you are simply giving wrong information to European consumers. Whether they want to know it, that's a completely different story. However, you should label these products as not made in Israel. Now, the beauty of any European directive and interpretive notice is that no one could care less about it. About 90% of the member states do whatever they want to, and this actually was the case. However, France followed the notice. France decided that it is high time to label Israeli products from the settlements as made in the occupied territories. And one winery, which is actually a boutique winery, and I must say a lousy winery, which sold sold its wine in France, was to be labeled as settlements product, because the winery is in the settlements. And that winery was extremely unhappy with the idea that its products are to be labeled as made in the settlements. And we reached this second beautiful decision of the European Court of Justice, which is the Psagot, which is the winery decision. And let's read it carefully. As we say, fresh from the oven, published on November 12th. Foodstuffs originating in the territories occupied by the State of Israel must bear the indication of their territorial origin, accompanied where those foodstuffs come from an Israeli settlement within that territory by the indication of that provenance. Consumers cannot, listen to the following, consumers cannot be expected to guess in the absence of any information capable of enlightening them in that respect. That foodstuff comes from a locality or a set of localities constituting a settlement established in one of those territories in breach of the rules of international humanitarian law. To that extent, the omission of the indication that a foodstuff comes from an Israeli settlement located in one of the territories is likely to mislead consumers by suggesting that that food has a place of provenance other than its true place of provenance. That conclusion is supported by the objective to ensure a high level of consumer protection in relation to food information, taking into account the differences in perception of consumers. It follows that the provision of information to consumers must enable them to make informed choices with particular regard to health, economic, environmental, social, and listen to the following, ethical considerations. This decision, as you can imagine, was expected. However, that Israeli winery insisted in challenging the European authorities. By the way, if until now most of the member states didn't respect the interpretive notice, now after the court's ruling, they will all have to follow it, and they will all have to label Israeli sediments products as Israeli sediments products. Now, once again, I want to put this into perspective, because I'm talking about basically 0.1% of the Israeli export to the European markets, but this is a very strong normative statement of the European Union regarding occupation. Occupation is an illegal norm. It's illegal from an international law perspective and from a European Union law perspective. The message is very, very clear. All this tells you another story, guys. And the story is very clear. I don't think that I will have time to go through all this. For the past 3 years, Israel developed a passionate love story with a new group of countries in Europe. This is the group, the Visegrad 4 countries. Israel found finally its lovers in the European Union under Benjamin Netanyahu. The major key partner is Viktor Orban. Netanyahu, which one should really say the truth, despises the European Union, decided that the only way to veto and block European Union decisions against Israel is by approaching countries such as the V4 countries, which are extremely unhappy with what they call the undemocratic liberal model of the European Union. And by using these countries for the past 3 years, one should say the truth. Netanyahu is extremely successful in blocking any decision on Israel. Blocking minority, we all know the trick. And Netanyahu basically teamed up with the V4 countries, with Bulgaria and Romania, and since Alexis Tsipras was the Prime Minister of Greece, also with Greece. These countries today form basically a shield, an Israeli shield against European decisions. Now what I wanted to show you here is that in 2017, Netanyahu was invited by the V4 countries to their annual summit in Hungary. You can see Netanyahu with his best friend, Viktor Orban, up there. And in what really shocked the world, he left one of the microphones open during a closed-door meeting. No one knows if that was done purposely or not. But listen to the following, what Netanyahu had to tell the European V4 leaders. He called the Union's treatment of Israel crazy, and he said that there is an anomaly. I don't hide it. We are often criticized by Western Europe, often more than any other place in the world. The Union, he continued, undermines the only country in the region that is looking after Europe's interests. Stop attacking Israel, support Israel. In August 2018, Netanyahu already admitted, I'm a Eurosceptic. I'm here to stop the European Union basically from criticizing Israel. In a visit to Lithuania, listen to the following. He basically revealed his strategy when it comes to Israeli-EU relations. I want to achieve a balance in the Union's not always friendly relations with Israel in order to maintain fair and genuine relations. I'm doing it through contacts with blocs of EU countries, Eastern European countries, and now with Baltic countries and other countries, of course. Very clear strategy. I'm basically a Eurosceptic leader, and I'm stopping or blocking the European Union from any possible decision on Israel. Now, I want to finish this part and then we'll move on to questions, etc. We're just about to publish a new research on Israel's relations with some of the populist and Eurosceptic countries and parties. When it comes to Italy, you won't be surprised to know that Salvini is also Netanyahu's best friend. Salvini admires Netanyahu. Netanyahu calls Salvini Israel's best friend. And we interviewed a senior diplomat in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I would conclude my presentation, but we'll open it to questions and answers, with the following statement by a senior Israeli diplomat on this new relationship with the V4 countries. The EU has different shades of democracy, playing with the different shades of grey. With Hungary and the other V4 countries, we share interests. We understand democracy in a similar way. We understand democracy with Hungary in a similar way. Quite shocking. And we have the same analysis regarding the Middle East and the Muslim world. We get all the support we need from them, and they are always open to our arguments. As for anti-Semitism, none of them is anti-Semitic. We simply have different narratives regarding the Holocaust. Above all, we share common values with them. Now, I don't know how many of you know of Andrea Petto. Professor Andrea Petto is a professor at the CEU. And she developed a new concept, CEU, that was kicked out of Budapest and now seeks asylum in Vienna. And Andrea decided to try to explain to us what's going on in Hungary, and she developed the concept of a polypore state. Now, before you Google the word polypore is a mushroom that lives and grows on trees and basically eats the trees from within until the tree is dead. And she's arguing that Hungary today is a polypore state. What you see here is basically a relationship between two polypores. What I suggest that we do now, we open the floor for questions and answers, because otherwise I can speak forever. I saw a question there. Yes, please. Would you like the microphone?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Just a second.
תודה בשבוע שלו. אני סטודנט Erasmus בטורקיה.
Speak to the microphone.
Yes, okay. 2 weeks ago we were in European Parliament.
I have to stop you first because you have to tell us your name. You know my name and I don't know yours.
Khan.
Okay, Khan.
Yeah. We were in European Parliament and I asked Simon Zoltan that question. Should European Union countries recognize Jerusalem as a capital city of Israel? And he said European Union have distinct and really strong ideas about that. And these territories occupied territories, he said. What do you think about that?
Shall we pick up some questions, or how should we do it?
Just Giovanni, 2 or 3 questions. Let's say. Okay, one here and one there.
Just
There are three questions here. Okay, so let's collect 4 questions. Okay.
טוב, שלום. considering my name is
What's your name, sorry?
Antonio.
Antonio. Thank you.
Considering the recent evolution in Israel concerning various matters, especially economic and social dimensions, the eventual opportunity and considering also the eventual opportunities of further cooperation between Europe and Israel, can we expect the current charges retained against the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, as a turning point in Israel-Korean relationship? And could Benny Grant's party Benny Grant's party
Benny Gantz.
hosting as well, be able to overcome the current issues regarding the country and strengthen the EU-Israeli relation? So,
Thank you very much, Antonio. I'm surprised at the level of Hebrew here.
Sharon, I'm Osama Souhail from Morocco. I'm a student international relations for 1 year in Italy. I've passed one semester in Budapest. I'm really interested in the Israeli, I can describe it as a way to change the canon and terms of universal law on this planet. If we want to have an agreement, we should change the definition of war crime, the term of Raphael Lemkin of genocide, the term of... There is a lot of points that we have to revise to have an agreement with the European Union and a lot of countries in the world. So I believe that we have to change the global order to suit with the foreign policy of Israel. My question is about how you, as an academic researcher, how you find the relation between Israel and the new tendency of Arabi Saudi, and how you can use this tool, like the Israeli officials, that they can use this tool to bring more attention from the European officials that even the more close and the more severe enemies can be friends. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pardo. My name is Sergey.
Call me Mr. My name is Sharon.
Okay, Mr. Sharon.
So no Mr.
But I respect you.
I respect you, so that's why call me by my first name.
Okay, my friend Sharon.
What is your name?
Sergey from Russia. I had two questions, but one was asked you about political crisis and this political situation in Israel and the parliament.
You mean the current crisis?
Yeah. Could you also tell me about this? And another question is about Holland Heights.
About?
The Holland Heights. The
Holland
Heights.
Heights.
What's your personal maybe attitude and what is your vision about the future of these territories? How it will be incorporated in Israel or return to Syria or become some kind of transition territory? I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah. There's another question. Should we take another one? Another one. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Morocco as well, and I study international relations here. Thank you first for your presentation, and thank you. I would also like to thank you for the way you approached your discourse. We could feel that you were pretty, let's say, objective about the issues regarding the Israeli-Arab conflict as well as the Israeli-EU conflict, which is something to be appreciated, and it is inspiring. You've talked before in the beginning about the salient role the Arab-Israeli conflict the role it plays in preventing the EU-Israeli relations from going to the other stage, to the next level. But you also said that the EU is the biggest economic partner of Israel, and also speaking from a diplomatic point of view, Israeli citizens can move freely in the EU, not as much as EU citizens, but they can go there as without any visas, without any restrictions, I guess, as soon as far as
Europeans are allowed to enter our visa. It's a visa-free regime.
Yeah, obviously, but it's the only country, I guess, in the region whose citizens can go to Israel without having to apply for a visa, right? Israel.
I'm not sure that
I think
Israelis are allowed to enter visa-free to the EU, and EU citizens are allowed to enter Israel visa-free. This is a visa-free regime.
This is exactly what I'm saying. So we can say that Israel already has a really special position as far as the EU is concerned. For example, I come from Morocco, and
there's a visa regime on
exactly, and the EU is the biggest economic partner of Morocco, but still we can't go there visa-free, right? So what did you mean by the next level when you said that? What is the next level for you, or also for Israel? Because you spoke about it in the beginning. You said the Arab conflict is preventing Israel and you from moving on to the next level.
Okay, shukran. Okay, I think we have. Oh, there's another one, but you know what? Shall we? Will that be a quick one?
Yeah.
Let's go for a quick one.
Okay, my name is Ayub. I'm also from Morocco.
What is your name?
Ayub.
Hey, wow.
Microphone. Wait a second.
Okay, first of all, thanks for the presentation. My name is Ayub. I am from Morocco as well. And I would like to ask, because you focused on the fact that the union for the Mediterranean is not a success, and you also emphasized the fact that there is a big portion of Israeli people who were in the origin Europeans. I would like to say that even in Israel there is a big portion of Arab Israelis, especially Moroccans. There is a lot of Moroccan Jews, and why there is no cooperation of solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts through the implementation of this big portion of Moroccans and Arab in general, and how we cannot work on the relation between Israel and Arab states in order to come to a conclusion by switching the perspective of the Israeli government also.
Okay, I think we have enough questions here. Well, at least for another lecture of 90 minutes. Well, thank you very much for all these questions. Great questions. Wow, this is what you faced during this program. Impressive guys. You're all well informed, and these are challenging questions. So, first question was regarding the question of Jerusalem. Well, I don't know exactly what you heard in the European Parliament. I can tell you that when it comes to Jerusalem, there was a clear decision in 2009 by the European Union, which basically says something which is in line with the Venice Declaration. When it comes to Jerusalem, the official line is that right now the EU is not to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. However, if eventually the two sides will come to an agreement in which the two of them recognize Jerusalem as their own capitals, then we will recognize the two cities as the capital of two states, Palestine and Israel. Now, the line that you heard is, I don't know if you discussed it with a member of parliament or with an official of the European Parliament. The line that you heard is something which I would say is kind of a bit outdated. Why is it outdated? Because following the official recognition of President Trump of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and the fact that the US moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we started to see something, a movement also within some European capitals. Hungary already opened a mission, a trade mission to Jerusalem, which is accredited with diplomatic status, namely saying we recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The same happened with two other European countries, and strangely enough, I don't know if you followed the news just last week, Faroe Islands, you know, this is the football soccer club that we all defeat. The Faroe Islands decided to play a little bit the elbow game with Denmark, its ruler, and basically said that they intend to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and open a diplomatic mission there. What we see today, we see more and more unrest within the groups that Netanyahu is working with in order to push for recognition of Jerusalem. However, the official line is very clear and very simple. Jerusalem will be recognized by the European Union as the capital of the two states once the two countries reach an agreement. However, bear in mind that on the ground we see a little bit of a different attitude. The Israeli parliament is in Jerusalem. The residence of the president of the state of Israel is in Jerusalem. All the European ambassadors are being accredited in Jerusalem in the house of the president. When they visit the Israeli parliament, they visit Jerusalem. So in a way, there are those who would argue, well, anyway, they recognize Jerusalem de facto, if not de jure. However, the official line is very, very clear. Antonio, regarding current affairs, and this actually goes hand in hand with Sergio's question. Well, as you all know, as of last night, the Attorney General, Israel's Attorney General, decided to indict Benjamin Netanyahu with corruption. This is a big, big decision that was made last night. Now, this should also be seen in a context, and the context is the two rounds of elections that were in Israel. There's a good chance that Israel might go again to election. The first round was in April, the second round was in September, and basically no party can form a coalition. We follow the Italian model. No government is probably the best scenario. Right now there's what we call a caretaker government. Netanyahu is to be indicted. Now this can go on and on because now there are stumbling blocks, political issues, why he won't go. I won't dive into it, but this clearly says something about, first of all, the strength of the Israeli democracy. I think it was Mohammed who thanked me for my position. You don't have to thank me. I'm living in a democratic country, and my role as an academic is to offer you critical thinking. I'm not a member of Netanyahu's fan club, and I'm there as an academic. Our role is to be critical. This is the strength of our democracies. The more critical we are, this tells you the story of the strength of our democracies. And I appreciate your comment, but if I were not to criticize the Israeli government, I would have. Well, thank you very much, but there's no need for that. So right now, the current political crisis is a real one. Israel right now has no government. It doesn't look as if it will be a new government. However, one should tell you the truth. Both parties are actually quite hostile towards the European Union. Even the blue and white movement is quite unhospitable. The only context in which we saw EU-Israeli relations being discussed was actually when it comes to the Iranian question, and both the Blue and White movement and the Likud party actually expected the European Union to play a different role in the Iranian crisis. Now, another mirror that tells you about the current relationship is, as you all know, Israel hosted, or I should even say Israel, in a minute you'll understand why. Tel Aviv hosted recently the Eurovision Song Contest, which was beautiful, except for Madonna, which was terrible. You've probably noticed that the focus during that competition was not on Israel. It was all about Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a cool city. Tel Aviv basically was the one to host the Eurovision and not Israel. And you ask yourself what happened there. This was not the original idea. Netanyahu and the Israeli government could not excuse EBU for picking up Tel Aviv rather than Jerusalem as the host city of the Eurovision Song Contest. More than that, Netanyahu was hoping that with the European competition, the largest cultural competition in the world, he will be able to finally close down the Israeli public radio and television authority, which he despises. So you know what you do? You ask them to host the largest cultural competition in the world, and they will be bankrupt within 24 hours after the competition. And this was his major hope. That's why he showed a very cold shoulder to the competition. You've noticed that eventually it was the city of Tel Aviv that literally saved the competition. As for the Israeli Broadcast Authority, who knows what will happen to it? Probably it will take actually quite a lot of time for them to get out of their deep financial situation. We will see what kind of government eventually will emerge there. We don't know. The one thing that I can say about it is that the two large parties in Israel are definitely not hospitable to the European Union. That's quite clear. So that goes to Antonio and Sergio. Osama, you basically asked about how you find the relationship with Israel and the Arab world. I promise you within 5 minutes we are done. So about the current relations. Now I should give it to Netanyahu clearly. You know, Netanyahu, when it comes to relations with Chad, with Oman, he managed. You know, you can say whatever about Netanyahu and you can criticize him as long as you want. He was successful. When it comes to the secret channel of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, clearly Netanyahu plays the card well. So both Africa, the Arab world, and Saudi Arabia clearly, without even the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the loop, Netanyahu plays it well. I would expect the European Union to support these new relations as much as possible when it comes to Israelis and Morocco. As you probably know, Israelis do visit Morocco these days. There's a large Moroccan community in Israel, which are, by the way, mostly Netanyahu supporters. But one should admit that on that front, Netanyahu was extremely successful, and we don't know even the scope of the secret channel of the relationships. And I would expect the European Union to play and to support as much as possible this development. This goes also to you questions. Regarding the Barcelona process and the Union for the Mediterranean. You know, the moment the Middle East peace process was in the picture, that was basically the end of the Barcelona process. And that's why the European Union really tried to put the focus on the cultural dimension and the financial economic dimension, what we call the baskets. Anything to do with the Middle East peace process, immediately the process, the Barcelona process crashed. Same happened in a way to the Union for the Mediterranean. Clearly, these fora are not the right fora for developing the relations. However, we should also mention that this was probably the only regional forum in which official Israelis met with officials from the Arab countries. However, one of the reasons why this forum eventually passed away has to do with the Middle East peace conflict. So in my mind, I'm not sure that this is the way ahead. Now, you've asked about the way ahead, and strangely enough, in 2013, the European Union put on the table a new program, a new plan for the future of Israeli-EU relations together with the Palestinians. And the European Union offered Israel and the Palestinians what it calls special privilege partnership. Now, no one knows anything about special privilege partnership because the European Union never really developed it. However, this is what we know until now. In the event of a final peace agreement, the European Union will offer Israel and the future state of Palestine a special privilege partnership, including increased access to the European markets, closer cultural and scientific links, facilitation of trade and investments, as well as promotion of business-to-business relations. Enhanced political dialogue and security cooperation will also be offered to both states. We also know that what we are talking about is the next best thing to membership, and it's a status akin to Norway and Switzerland across a gamut of areas: security, politics, economics, trade, science and technology, and so on. One should say Israel refuses to discuss the special privilege partnership with the European Union. The European Union itself never really developed the concept, so this is the next phase. If you're asking me what is to my mind the next phase, I would tell you, and I would be very honest with you. To my mind, the European Union should offer Israelis and Palestinians full membership in the European Union. This is, to my mind, the best solution. As I said, Israelis are extremely hospitable towards the idea of full membership, and to my mind, this can be a major incentive. If this will ever happen, inshallah, who knows, but even the fact that the two parties or the three parties will negotiate it forever, like the Turks and the Europeans, to my mind, this can be a major incentive. I think it's 4 o'clock. It's
4 o'clock. Please give me the microphone for some closing remarks. Yes. I hope this program has helped you to grasp, a bit the dynamics affecting Europe as a region and the European Union and international relations in general. It has been wonderful to have you all on board this program. Good luck for your future, and take care of yourself and of the world. Okay?